In September of 1912, an occult order printed its own supreme secret in a magazine. The magazine belonged to the order, not a leak, not a betrayal by a disappointed initiate. The head of the order wrote the sentence himself, said it in type, and sent it out to be read, and the sentence is still readable today. Anyone can find it. It says in plain words what the order believed it possessed and what that possession explained. Hold on to that, because it will not be what you expect. We come back to the sentence, and to the reason a secret society would publish the thing it existed to protect. The order is the Ordo Templi Orientis. The man most people associate with it is Aleister Crowley. Almost everything commonly said about both is a claim of descent, and claims of descent can be checked. Start with the name, because the name is already an argument. Ordo Templi Orientis means Order of the Temple of the East, Order of Oriental Templars. That is a specific thing to call yourself. It says a line runs from the medieval Knights Templar to a group of European men meeting in rented rooms at the turn of the 20th century. There is no historical continuity between the two. The order is a modern esoteric organization. The name is a claim about the past, not a record of one. This matters more than it sounds. It is the first instance of a pattern that runs through the whole story, and once you see the pattern, you will see it 4 more times before this video ends. The pattern is simple. A claim is made about where authority came from. Then you go looking for the document that would carry it. Sometimes the document is there. Sometimes it is missing. Sometimes it was written afterwards by the person the claim benefits, which brings us to Theodor Reuss. Born 1855, died 1923. Before any of this, he was a professional singer, a music hall performer, and a newspaper correspondent. He was also, in 1886, expelled from the Socialist League in London, accused of being a paid informer for the Prussian secret police. The accusation came in the middle of a factional quarrel, and it was publicly disputed at the time. The expulsion is a matter of record. The accusation is an accusation. Keep those apart, because everything in this story depends on keeping those apart. What Reuss did next is the important part, and it is the least mysterious thing a man has ever done. He collected paperwork. In 1901, he received a charter for the Swedenborgian Rite from William Wynn Westcott. The same year, a Martinist appointment from Gerardin Cosse, the French occultist who wrote as Papus. The year after that, letters patent for the Scottish Rite from John Yarker. Remember Yarker? That name comes back in a courtroom 70 years later. A charter is a piece of paper that says another organization recognizes you. Reuss assembled a stack of them, and from that stack he built a new order. Here is where the story usually opens, and here is where it usually goes wrong. Nearly every popular account begins with Carl Kellner founding the order in 1895. Kellner was real, and he was not a small man. An Austrian chemist and industrialist, born 1851, died 1905. He co-invented an industrial process for making caustic soda and chlorine that carries his name to this day. The traditional account says Kellner had the idea, discussed it with Reuss, and that the two of them conceived the order together. That account comes from the order. Now check the paper. The earliest documented appearance of the order is a manifesto published in the periodical Oriflamme in 1904. Kellner died the following year. Reuss published the claim that Kellner was the founder years after Kellner was dead. The man being named as the source of the authority was not alive to confirm it or to deny it, and the Constitution dated 1906 has its own problem. At least one academic account holds that the document was likely produced closer to 1912, that is, backdated by 6 years in an order whose whole appeal was antiquity. I am not saying Kellner was a fiction. He existed, he was interested in exactly these subjects, and he knew Reuss. What I am saying is narrower and firmer. There is no document from Kellner's lifetime that puts him inside this order. So the order exists at the latest by 1904, and in September of 1912, Reuss issued a jubilee edition of the Oriflamme. This is the sentence we opened with. The order, it announced, possesses the key which opens all Masonic and Hermetic secrets, namely the teaching of sexual magic, and that teaching, it claimed, explains without exception all the secrets of nature, all the symbolism of Freemasonry, and every system of religion. Read that again for what it actually does. The order announced its supreme secret in print in the year of its jubilee in a magazine anyone could obtain, which tells you something precise about how secrecy worked here. The information was never the secret. The information was the advertisement. What was withheld was the method. The ritual, the sequence, the degree structure that decided who was told what and when. You can print the name of a thing and still keep the practice of it behind 9 doors. That is the first loop closed, and it changes the shape of everything after it. This is not an order that hid what it had. It is an order that published what it had and then sold access to it in stages. And it is here that the Englishman enters. Edward Alexander Crowley was born in 1875 in Royal Leamington Spa. The money that funded the rest of this story came from beer, the family brewing business, Crowley's Alton Ales. In November of 1898, he was initiated into the outer order of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn by Samuel Liddell MacGregor Mathers. He was 23. A year later, he bought Boleskine House on the shore of Loch Ness in order to perform a long magical operation described in a manuscript called the Book of Abramelin. In 1900, the Golden Dawn tore itself apart, and Crowley was in the middle of it. Acting on Mathers' orders, he attempted to seize the order's inner sanctum at a London address. The court found for the London members. Both he and Mathers came out of it isolated. That detail is worth holding. The man who would later claim the leadership of a worldwide order had already lost one fight over who owned a temple in a courtroom. In February of 1904, Crowley was in Cairo with his wife, Rose Edith Kelly. What happened next is the foundation of everything he built afterwards, and it rests entirely on his own account. He said that on the 8th of April a voice spoke to him. He called the voice Awas. He wrote for 1 hour at noon on the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th, 1 chapter each day. The result is called Liber Alvel Legis, the Book of the Law. It is short, and it contains the line that the entire 20th century occult revival ended up carrying: "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." There is no external record of the dictation, and there could not be. Crowley knew that, and argued instead that the text contained puzzles no forger could have built. That is an argument about the text, not evidence about the event. 3 years later, in November of 1907, he founded his own order with George Cecil Jones. He called it the AA. That order was his. The o.t.o. was not, and would have to be acquired. Because that one line has been quoted for a century by people who never read the next one, it is worth slowing down here. Thelema is a Greek word. In classical Greek it is rare, and it leans towards appetite, desire, sometimes sexual desire. In the Greek New Testament it appears more than 60 times, and there it means something else entirely, the will of God. Crowley took the second sense and made it personal. The doctrine distinguishes true will, a person's actual purpose, from ordinary wanting. Do what thou wilt is not a license to do as you please. In his system, it is closer to an obligation to find out what you are for, and the phrase is not original to him, which he said himself. It comes from the 16th century writer François Rabelais, whose fictional Abbey of Thelema had one rule: do what you will. Crowley acknowledged the precedent in print in 1926. The Book of the Law also gives the answer half of the formula: love is the law, love under will, and the line that made it attractive to a great many people who wanted nothing to do with the rest of it: every man and every woman is a star. That is what is written. Now what happened? The story of how Crowley reached the 9th degree of the o.t.o. is the most retold scene of his life. It goes like this. Crowley publishes a book of short, deliberately obscure chapters called the Book of Lies. Reuss arrives at his rooms. Reuss is angry. He opens the book, points at one chapter, and demands to know how Crowley learned the secret of the 9th degree. Crowley protests that he does not know it. Reuss tells him he has printed it in the plainest language. Crowley reads the passage again, understands what he has written, and is admitted to the degree on the spot. It is a wonderful scene. It has the two things a founding story needs: an accident and a witness. And it appears in Crowley's own autobiography, The Confessions, which is where nearly everyone gets it from. The Book of Lies was published in 1913. Crowley's charter from Reuss is from 1912. The book that supposedly caused the initiation came out after the initiation, and the person who noticed this was Crowley. He acknowledged in writing that it could not have happened the way he remembered, because the book had not yet appeared when he joined the order. There is a second problem underneath the first. Even among people who accept the scene, there is no agreement about which chapter is supposed to contain the secret. One reading points to chapter 69. Crowley's own later writing points to chapter 36. So the most famous initiation story in modern occultism is a scene its own narrator withdrew about a passage nobody can identify in a book that did not exist yet. That is the second loop closed. And notice what has actually been lost here, not the fact of the 9th degree, which is documented, but the story about how it was reached, which is not. Strip out the anecdote and the record is still substantial and still strange enough. In 1912, Reuss conferred the 9th degree on Crowley and appointed him National Grand Master General, 10th degree, for Great Britain and Ireland. Sources differ on the exact day, which is why I am not giving you one. The year is not in dispute. Crowley named his British section the Mysteria Mystica Maxima. The following year in Moscow, he wrote the ritual the order is still best known for outside its own membership, the Gnostic Mass, catalogued as Liber 15. And the structure he inherited and reshaped is a ladder of 13 numbered degrees grouped into 3 stages. The man of earth, the lover, the hermit, you climb, and at each level you are told more. Every one of those things has paper behind it. Charters, published rituals, printed constitutions, membership records. Up to this point the chain holds. From here on it does not. In April of 1920, Crowley founded a small commune in a rented villa at Cefalu in Sicily and called it the Abbey of Thelema. In February of 1923, a young English follower, Rael Loveday, died there. His death was reported widely and luridly in the British press. It was in the wake of that death that the magazine John Bull called Crowley the wickedest man in the world. That phrase has followed him for 100 years. It is a tabloid headline. It is not a finding. 2 months later, the Italian government expelled him from the country. The abbey ended. Crowley spent the rest of his life short of money, in poor health, and dependent on the drugs he had been prescribed for asthma. In 1934, he sued a writer and her publisher for libel over a book that described black magic at Cefalu. He lost, and the loss ruined him financially. Now the succession, which is the part everybody states as fact and nobody sources. The usual telling is that Reuss died and Crowley inherited the order. Reuss died in October of 1923. And there is a document that would settle it, a letter from Reuss designating Crowley as outer head of the order. That letter has never been found, and the sequence is stranger than a missing letter. Crowley proclaimed himself outer head of the order in November of 1921, with Reuss alive, and nearly 2 years before Reuss died. He was formally elected to the position in 1925 at a conference of Grand Masters. Other claimants disputed it then, and the dispute did not end with them. Crowley named Carl Kellner his successor in 1942. He died on the 1st of December 1947 at Hastings on the English coast, aged 72. The order's most active branch by then was in California, and its most remarkable member was a rocket engineer. Jack Parsons, one of the founders of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, was initiated in 1941 and led the Californian branch from the following year. In February of 1946, in the Mojave Desert, Parsons carried out a series of rituals he called the Babylon Working. His scribe was a young writer named L. Ron Hubbard, who would later found Scientology. Crowley, from England, was unimpressed. He wrote to Germer complaining about the idiocy of these louts. It is a useful reminder that the founder of the modern order spent his last years exasperated by its most famous experiment. Parsons died in 1952 in an explosion in his home laboratory. Germer died in 1962 without naming a successor. The order had a name, a literature, a membership, and no head at all. Whoever reopened it would not do it with a vision. What reopened it was a letter that did exist. During the war, Crowley had written to a young American member, Grady McMurtry, granting him emergency authority to take charge if the order ever collapsed. McMurtry invoked those letters in 1969. He gathered what remained, and in 1979 he incorporated the order in the state of California. Which is how the question of who ran a magical order ended up in front of a federal judge. In July of 1985, a United States District Court in Northern California ruled. McMurtry's body was the legal continuation of the organization that ran from Crowley through Germer. It held the exclusive rights to the name, to the order's emblem, and to Crowley's literary estate. Whatever else you think of that, look at what it is. An order that claimed descent from the Knights Templar received its descent, finally and enforceably, from a judge reading titles of ownership. So here is the answer to what the Ordo Templi Orientis is. It is a modern initiatory order, founded in the first years of the 20th century by Theodor Reuss out of a stack of Masonic charters, organized in 13 degrees, reshaped after 1912 by Aleister Crowley around the doctrine of Thelema, and still operating today. And here is the thing worth taking away, which is not about the order at all. Every link in this chain that survives is documentary. The charter from Yarker, the manifesto in the Oriflamme, the jubilee announcement. Crowley's warrant of 1912, the naming of Germer in 1942, the wartime letters to McMurtry, the judgment of 1985, and every link that fails the same way. The Templar descent has no document. Kellner's founding has no document from his lifetime. The scene with the Book of Lies contradicts the dates. The letter from Reuss has never been produced. This is not an argument that the order is fraudulent. Orders survive on paperwork. That is how any institution crosses a century, and there is nothing shameful in it. The point is that the paperwork was always the load-bearing part, while the mystery was the part on display, which gives you something you can use tonight on the next thing you read about any of this. When a text tells you that a lineage runs from someone to someone else, do not argue with it and do not believe it. Ask which paper exists and what year it was written. That question is older than the order, and it has never once failed. Next time we go down instead of up into the lower degrees, the ones that are actually taught before anyone reaches the 9th, and what a new member is really given. If you want that one, subscribe and it will find you.